UFTV is your university and community TV station.
David Zock is the lead singer and songwriter for the rock band Remedy Drive, as well as an advocate in the fight against human trafficking. The band has recorded 2 concept albums to shine a light on slavery and to celebrate the modern-day abolition. The band's community and fan base has contributed about $350,000 in donations and in-kind donations to the counter-trafficking organization, the Exodus Road. When the band is not on tour, David volunteers with the Exodus Road as an undercover operative. He spends time in brothels and in the red light districts where underage girls and boys are sold by the hour. His role while undercover is to identify instances of minors being sold and to capture actionable evidence of their trafficking using covert gear, some in which is funded by the Remedy Drive community and fan base. Upon returning from deployment overseas, David uses the band and his platform to advocate for the victims of human trafficking, to shine a light on slavery, and to speak about his time overseas, with the goal of recruiting and funding the fight, which is the modern Underground Railroad. He has spoken at many of the major festivals during talkback sessions, main stages, and seminar tents. He also speaks at colleges, conferences, high school campuses, and churches. David's message centers upon a core belief of Remedy Drive and the Exodus Road. Justice is in the hands of the ordinary.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, everybody. I get to be at your university for 4 days, which I'm excited about, and today was the first of those 4 days, and it's been fantastic. I'm meeting some amazing people and getting into a lot of really great conversations. So I'm honored that you come and join me tonight. I'm going to start with this video. My day job is my rock and roll band. We're called Remedy Drive, and like she said, we are also abolitionists. We've merged our band with a counter-trafficking organization called the Exodus Road, and I volunteer with the Exodus Road using spy gear, cyber forensics software, cameras. We find evidence of sex trafficking, and then we take that evidence to our police partnerships to rescue girls and boys out of sex trafficking. And so far, the Exodus Road has contributed to the freedom of over 1,400 survivors of human trafficking. And we've helped to arrest and put behind bars and bring to justice over 600 traffickers, which is something I think is worth celebrating on a Tuesday night in Ohio. I forgot where I was for a second, and I'm so sorry. I've been in 6 states in the past couple days. My brother and I started recording our most recent album. It's called The North Star, on top of buildings within blocks of the same red light district streets that we'd work on at night, because it's my hope and my goal that the heaviness of this finds its ways in our melodies. And then something I'm really excited about is we started making all our band's merchandise by organizations that help rehabilitate survivors of trafficking. They're cutting our shirts, they're sewing our shirts, they're stitching them together. They are making elephant pants and boho pants, some of which I barely got set up tonight because I was enjoying dinner so much with some friends. And then we sell this stuff at concerts, and it contributes to funding these organizations that are heroically helping to give these precious girls a second chance. And I took my daughter Stella, whose birthday was 2 days ago, my daughter Ava, and my son Jack, and my wife Anna to Asia with me 1 year ago to get to see some of these organizations, to get to see these heroines doing the frontline work and the heroic work of restoring girls that have had so much taken from them, and to get to see the creativity that goes into helping to give this transitional employment to women that have been rescued, to help them with entrepreneurship. They got to go to a state-of-the-art culinary arts facility for girls that have been rescued that are now getting to learn to run a kitchen, to cook, to decorate cakes, which is something that resonated in my family because I've been decorating cakes for my kids for the past decade. I made a pretty good R2-D2 a couple years ago, Olaf, BB-8. Can't remember all the ones I've done, but my BB-8 was pretty great. It's hard to get a sphere to work, but I did somehow. So that's who I am, that's what I'm doing. That is why I'm here with you tonight. Never dreamed that a songwriter that grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, that I'd get to participate in a movement of justice to this degree. It's small, it's seemingly insignificant in a time in history when there's more people enslaved, more people impacted by slavery than at any other time in human history. 1,400 rescued survivors seems small, but it's something I'm celebrating, and it's something that I hope the little bit that I've been able to do with my band and with my time, I think the greater thing that we are doing as a rock and roll band is nudging our listeners towards justice and mercy and compassion. And in an atmosphere like tonight, to reinforce the idea that advocating and amplifying the voice of those whose voices are being drowned out or being ignored is a kind of leadership that is vital to our future as a human race, and also really important for what is being informed in all of us. And if anything else, what I want you to walk away from this short hour that we have together is this idea: you're going to hear a consistent lie in your life, a group of lies that are going to come at you and say, you are not significant enough, you're not qualified enough, you're disqualified maybe from doing important work. And even if you are doing important work, does it really matter in the face of such massive issues that we're facing as a human race? And I'm here to tell you it matters. And I'm here to tell you that you are qualified and that there's a contribution that you have that nobody else has. And if there's nothing else that you hear from me tonight, that's what I want to say. And in the areas that that we're not qualified, that's why I'm kind of envious of you, because you're at a point in your life where you can take a class to help with those credentials, to help learn in certain ways. I have to learn retrograde because all I studied in college was mathematics, and that has not helped me much in my life so far. I was just stuck in this tall building at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln called Old Father's Hall. It was like my Rapunzel's tower. I was just up there trying to figure out how to prove that there's an infinite list of prime numbers. And there is an infinite list of prime numbers. I thought there wasn't because, 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11. I thought that list would end at some point, but it does not end. And at one point in my life, I could prove it to you. My point is, here you are. You have your youth, the currency of your youth. Just like I have the currency of the keys and of this stringed instrument here. I'm going to spend the currency of my songs on freedom and on justice and on mercy and compassion. And there's a currency that you have that nobody else has. And I wish that I could have invested the currency of my youth in things that really mattered. And I'm here to tell you, you can. And it's going to seem small. There's going to be loud voices from friends, from family maybe, even from professional counselors that are going to say, man, do you really want to waste your life on that? And I'm telling you, you do. It matters, and there's something in the way that we are designed that makes us long to be participants in movements of freedom and justice and mercy, compassion. This is the background of how this happened for me. I met Matt Parker. We were both 7 years younger in that picture there. He came to Nashville. He's looking for a band to talk about the work of the Exodus Road. And I said, I don't want to just talk about this and not do anything. Take me with you. And he said, you should go home and talk to your wife about that first, which was wise words from Matt Parker. And it seems like a spur-of-the-moment thing for me to say at that point. I had just met him. He's looking for a band to talk about and raise funds for the Exodus Road. And here I'm saying, I want to go undercover with you. I want you to take me with you. I don't want to just talk about it. But I was writing music about it already, and how can I just sing about this and not do anything? There's enough preachers and politicians and speakers talking. I just watched that movie, 12 Years a Slave, and you see the bravery of ordinary human beings as they put their lives at risk for the freedom of others. When you see that, it moves something inside of you. I'd studied the abolition movement in our country, studied the life and the words of Harriet Tubman. What a brave woman. They're making a movie about her. The abolitionist from England, William Wilberforce, said, you can choose to look the other way, but you can never again say you did not know. Frederick Douglass, the abolitionist from here at home, said, the soul that is within me no man can degrade. Those quotes just kept on nudging me in a direction. When I was young, my mom told me about Amy Carmichael, a brave young woman 100 years ago who would dye her skin with coffee to disguise herself. She'd go into Hindu temples. She'd rescue 6-year-old girls from forced ritual prostitution. And her story was just dormant in me until decades later. I'm watching a video in April of 2012 with my daughter by some boys from San Diego that exposed this warlord that's enslaving kids and forcing them to carry AK-47s into conflict. And my 5-year-old girl is crying and she says, "Dad, why not God protect those boys?" And I just was restless. Didn't have an answer for her. And then his last public speech, the day before they killed him, Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Now's the time for us to develop a kind of dangerous unselfishness." And that quote and that man's example, the example of Matt Parker from the Exodus Road and all these different characters throughout history in my life. That's why I went home to my wife that night after meeting with Matt Parker. I said, "Matt," I said to my wife, "I want to join Matt. I want to do undercover work." And she says, "No way, what are you talking about?" So Matt comes over for breakfast the next morning. He tells me and my wife about his work. He tells about the failed attempts, the raids that go bad, the corrupt cops, and the success. And through tears, my wife says, "David's going to join you. This will be our legacy." And it's in the advocacy and the leadership of those voices, and not just the voices, but those voices in my life up to that point that led me to respond to Matt Parker in such a way. It was already there. And your voice and your advocacy is already going to be impacting people in your life. A couple other people that impacted me through their leadership in advocacy, one of them is a celebrity photographer by the name of Jeremy Cowart. And he happens to live 10 houses up from me now. But at that point in time, I didn't know him that well. He had taken my band's photos in '08, and then when I moved to Nashville, our kids were on the same baseball team. And I watched Jeremy advocate for child soldiers. And I had already been doing some benefit concerts with the band in support of invisible children who were helping to expose the warlord that I mentioned, Joseph Kony, throughout the early 2000s. And then I meet Jeremy and I see this guy that's taken photos of Sting. He just took Brandon Flowers from the Killers photo. He took pictures of Taylor Swift, who was just playing in here. This guy makes his money with that camera lens, right? And I saw him going over to Africa and taking photos of child soldiers and then helping set up art therapy programs with technology where kids can paint their past and paint some of the atrocities, how they were forced to, in their enslavement, forced to kill their parents, for instance, or do all these terrible things. So they'd paint that, and it was part of their trauma therapy. And then he'd superimpose these children's art and also their art that gave hope for the future after going through some of the trauma that they dealt with. And these pictures were just beautiful, and he auctioned off in support of an organization called Exile International. He also would take photos of the Rwandan genocide. Years after it, there was an amazing, miraculous restoration of people that were enemies. And it needs to be an example for the rest of the world to see. And what Jeremy did with his camera lens is he gave us a window into that reconciliation with a project called Voices of Reconciliation. And the one picture that really grabbed me from that series of photos that Jeremy did, and this was before we were friends, was a picture of a man with his arm around another man. And when they were kids, this guy here murdered this other guy's entire family as a child soldier. And here they are standing with their arms around each other, and on their bare skin is written the words in their language, "Love is our weapon against evil, our only weapon against evil." And the soil that they're standing on is the soil that this man's family died on in front of their hut. And Jeremy took that photo and a ton of other photos like that, telling the story, using his leadership as a celebrity photographer that's actually a celebrity in the photographer world. So he both shoots celebrities and he's a well-known photographer. He's using that platform to advocate for these voices that are being drowned out, but also for other people in similar situations. And it was so powerful and moving that they put those portraits in a series in a hall that delegates from the United Nations had to walk by on their way to sort out their differences. If these Rwandans can figure it out, maybe you guys can figure it out too, is what the message was sending. It's a beautiful message. So he used what he had. He used his camera lens. And here I see my friend Jeremy Coward. Man, he's using that camera lens. He's spending the currency of his camera lens on peace and justice, on mercy, on compassion. He had another one from Haiti called Voices of Peace. And I was just inspired by that. And I thought, what do I have to spend? What currency do I have to spend? What currency do you have to spend? And how can you spend that currency? And then in maybe 2006, the rock and roll band U2, their lead singer is named Bono. My kids don't like U2, which really bums me out. Maybe they'll grow into it. They don't like Bono's voice. Here's a rock star in a leather jacket before the President of the United States. And he's advocating for several third world countries that are in what Bono calls stupid, extreme poverty, preventable poverty. And there's these debts that are being held against these nations, and it's crippling them, and it's keeping their people in extreme poverty. And Bono's there also representing the One campaign and his fight against the AIDS crisis to a president, a rock star standing before a president and all sorts of other politicians. And he references an ancient prophet by the name of Isaiah, a poet who also advocated for the poor and the powerless in his writings. A beautiful poet. And in one particular stanza, he says, "If you spend yourself on behalf of the oppressed, then your light will rise like the noonday. And the Lord will go before you and will be your rear guard." So you have this rock star in a leather jacket telling the president of the superpower of the world to invest some of its currency on the poor and the powerless. And Bono says this, he says, "There's this currency that I have, they call it celebrity." And for some reason, Bono's complaining that people give this extra credit to celebrity. They inflate it, what it's actually worth. But he recognizes that the currency of his celebrity is worth something, so he's going to invest the currency of his celebrity on the AIDS crisis and on trying to help end this extreme poverty that's avoidable. And he says to the president at the time, he says that, it says the Lord will be your rear guard as well. Wouldn't it be nice, Mr. President, if you could count on somebody having your back? And in that speech, he said this. He says, God is in the slums. He's in the cardboard boxes where the poor play house. God is in the silence of a mother who's infected her daughter with a virus they'll both die from. God is in the cries heard under the rubble and the debris of war. And God is with us if we're with them. And then he referenced that prophet again. He said, if you spend yourself. And he said, I'm going to spend the currency of my celebrity on this. And those are maybe 10 examples that I've given you of people in my life that I knew. Some of them I met. Many of them I didn't meet. Some of them are alive. Some of them are no longer alive. And the ones that are no longer alive, their voice, but more importantly, their example of leadership and advocating for marginalized people groups and hurting people groups lived on after they were gone. Because I really believe that there's an enduring quality, something that outlives me, something bigger than my band, something bigger than nations. That when we're selfless, there's something to it that just reverberates. And I know with confidence that it's something that already reverberates in our innermost being. And when we take those steps of leadership, people are going to follow. I am following in the footsteps of people that have gone before me, women and men that have been brave in the face of oppression, in the face of fear, in the face of widespread apathy all around them. They were brave anyways. And that's what ushered in this chapter of my life. And so I'm leading. Mainly I'm leading my 2 daughters and my son in hopes that that they don't wait till they were in their 30s to start. This part's hard to talk about, but it's part of my story. The work we do is difficult. We go into brothels and we pretend to be customers. I use spy cameras. A lot of times in situations where they'll line up a group of girls and you pick out a girl that you're going to spend an hour with. This one girl in particular says, I don't want to go with this man. And the trafficker says, you have to go with this man. And she said, in her language, and I recorded the conversation, my translator told me back what was happening the next day. The trafficker said, the bar owner demands it. She says, I thought I could make enough money just selling drinks. And after an argument, the trafficker says to me in English, come back in a week, we'll have her ready for you. And this girl had to pay off her father's debt. Some loan shark took advantage of his misery. Sometimes they put girls behind glass, like in an aquarium. And men from all over the world will smoke and drink on one side of the glass and pick out a girl by a number on her bikini top or bikini bottom and take her for an hour. Maybe her number is 146 or 53 or 5. In Latin America, I spent a lot of time with cartels. In Latin America, there's undercover law enforcement embedded into these organizations with us. In Southeast Asia, it's different. But there are drug lords from Africa or drug dealers from Africa that are selling cocaine on the street, but they're also selling girls that are just sitting on the street corner. Sometimes in Latin America or in Southeast Asia, I'll get escorted up an elevator by a gangster. He'll frisk me. He'll look for weapons or cameras, take me to a hidden floor of that hotel, and in each room on that hidden floor, there's a girl from a different part of the world. And a lot of times she's strung out, and she's just waiting to be taken advantage of to make money for these punks. There's pedophile gangs that we follow. Some of them are set up by guys from here in our country. Some of them are set up by motorcycle gangs that have fled the strict laws against motorcycle gangs in Australia, and they set up shop in Southeast Asia. Sometimes I'm getting coffee from a child that carries a large thermos in public parks in Latin America, and in addition to selling coffee, if you talk to her, she's also selling cocaine and sex. And they have not even a hotel, just a place to go have sex with them like 2 blocks away. And that's what we're there to find evidence of. Actionable evidence that's going to lead to dismantling these criminal networks. Actionable evidence that's going to send a message to mafias and crime syndicates that someone's watching, even when the whole world's looking the other way. Someone's looking out for the daughters and the sons of your country, of your community. These actions that you do in the darkness are going to be brought to light. With our expensive technology that my band's community is helping fund, put it in the hands of the operatives that are working night after night in Latin America and in India and in Southeast Asia. The Exodus Road being one of several NGOs, non-government organizations that are doing this work. In a time in history when there's 40 million people impacted by slavery, there's a few hundred or a couple thousand people that are putting their life at risk for this. And that can get discouraging for me. It's discouraging for me to walk on a block on a street that seems to go on for a mile. And on either side of this street, there's brothels that are 2 and 3 stories high. And then every block, there's water on this side, but on every block on this side, there's alleyways snaking through with other brothels. And then an ice cream truck and a street performer. And then a McDonald's right in the middle of it. And a Starbucks on either end. That's disheartening to me. An industry propped up by our wars and by the demand for prostitution when our boys were stationed there and in the region. And the traffickers have come and taken control, taken advantage of this misery and this poverty and exploited this situation. But even then, without the demand, there wouldn't be any need to supply. And I walk down those streets, and I know that I'm in a town sometimes, a city sometimes, where I know that there's 100 or 200,000 girls and boys being sold for sex against their will in that one city, and that's one city of several that I've been in. And to go back to it, I'm going back in a month. To go back to it, you just feel this heaviness, like, man, what am I even doing here? And even just to hear my child say, "Hi, Daddy," brings me to tears on nights like that. 12 hours away. It's noon for her. It's midnight for me. It's 7 for her. It's 7 a.m. for me. I'm going to bed at 9 or at midnight. It's noon for her. And it can be disheartening. And I don't want to mislead you. But the reason you're drawn to justice is because there's a need. The reason we're drawn to take initiative and to advocate because there's a group of people who nobody's paying attention to. And it doesn't end, and that'll be a critique you get. Well, it doesn't end. You know how there's always somebody to talk about. There's always some emergency. But you're alive today, and I'm alive today. This is what's going on my watch. And yeah, slavery's been going on for a long time. Justified it with their Bibles in the South, where I live now. I drive from a southern suburb of Tennessee up to the state capitol the day after Charlottesville with my 2 daughters, pulled them out of school. And on my right, as I'm driving up the interstate, on my right, there's a statue to a general named Nathan Bedford Forrest, a Confederate general, Confederate flags all around. And we drive by that on the way up to our Capitol building. And the guy that put that statue there, it's an awful looking statue. There's some that look nice. This one looks awful because it was a lawyer that actually fabricated this statue. And it was the lawyer that defended the man that shot Martin Luther King Jr. that put that statue there that I have to drive by. Right now it's splattered with pink paint. And when he put it there, he didn't put it there 100 or 200 years ago. It's not celebrating history. It's celebrating slavery. The man that put that statue there that was trying to defend the man that killed our civil rights hero said someone needs to put in a good word for slavery. And that thing stands by I-65. It'd be like I-70. What's your big highway? It'd be like I-75. Yeah, so we went downtown the day after Charlottesville, and my daughters and I joined this protest because a bust of the same Confederate general who actually was a founder of the Ku Klux Klan is in my state capitol in front of a mural with slaves on the mural. And so that was just our way of saying, man, we're not okay with white supremacy the day after a white supremacist interrupted my brother as he played guitar in a church service in Charlottesville, my brother who has adopted 4 African-American children, and this man stood up to say that he's not racist, he's just defending white culture. And that seems small, There's only 300 people at that protest. It seems small, it seems insignificant. You know what seems small? My wife. When she goes on every Monday, many times she's wore out, and she gets sick a lot because she hangs out with a bunch of kids that are always sick, refugees from Congo and Uganda and Myanmar and Syria, and she's teaching these kids how to prepare for the American kindergarten system. For 3 hours a week, she gets to hang out with these kids. It seems small. What are you really accomplishing? It never feels like you would think it feels, and yet it's so important for us to do these small things with great love. And as a result of my wife's leadership and advocating for these kids, we have suddenly been welcomed into the refugee community and to get to eat meals with people from their part of the world and to go into their homes and to have, we had like 30 teenager Congolese and Ugandan kids in our house playing my son's drums in his room, playing all my guitars, broke my acoustic guitar, skidding out on our little mopeds in the backyard. It was glorious, and my wife cooked for all of them, all because my wife does this small thing. And all of our friends are so jealous of us. They're like, man, we wish we could do that. I'm like, you can do that. We need you to do that. Where are you? We got all these refugees in Nashville. Why don't you come help us? We need help. Can you help tutor math? And come on up. Tutor math for an hour. What's the big deal? I'm busy. But that leadership of my wife has rippled through our friends, and all our friends are so excited to join us, and they come and they're so pumped about it, and they're so excited for their children to get exposed to all these beautiful different cultures in our community. It's a small thing, and yet it just, that was my dream. I really just like to eat with people from different cultures. That was my goal, but we ended up there in such a way we never thought. It all happened with, our family was so bummed out about the rhetoric against refugees and the fear of refugees in Tennessee, and we wanted to try to exercise a little bit of leadership with our lives, and at a time, and you remember 2015 and 2016, those are rough days. All these sweet little Tennessean school kids were telling my children, why is your mom hanging out with refugees? Aren't refugees terrorists? So you combat that sort of backwards, one-sided thinking in a small way. And I'm trying to think of examples. I referenced my brother Paul. He's a hero of mine. He quit the band in 2010. He had fostered a girl, and then he adopted her. And then he's gone on and he's fostered to adopt 4 kids so far. And I think fostering is the most heroic thing anybody can do. It's painful sometimes. There's kids dealing with some heavy stuff. Kids that have gone through some things that impact the way they behave. And my brother he gets cussed at by one of his kids all the time. He just deals with it. He goes to classes to learn how to be loving in a situation where someone's experienced that kind of trauma at such a young age. I played a concert and I talked about this work, which is hard to do, especially when you got kids looking at you and there's families there. But afterwards, and I don't regret doing it because my mom told me about Harriet Tubman when I was a kid. And this girl came up to me afterwards, and I'm not quite sure what organization they worked with, but she said, David, my family does what you do. We hunt wolves and we rescue princesses. And that's the way she understands it. What a beautiful thing. And so they do a little bit, right? They do a little bit, and those parents are teaching their daughters that justice matters, that mercy matters, that courage matters. And what's that girl going to grow up and do? I don't know. She's not going to do nothing. She's not going to do nothing, And something that might hold you back, something that is going to hold me back is like, man, I don't have it all figured out. I don't know what to do. I don't even know where to start. But you have something really cool here. You have Robert. You have the what's the building called? The Buford Center. Buford Center. Did I say it right? One person said it after I said it as if I didn't say it right. What a cool thing you have. Advocating for multicultural experience, but at the same time going and doing something with those relationships, going and volunteering in some way that's going to feel small. That's fine, because that's going to lead to something. If you get into the habit of doing these small things, you're going to realize, you know what? Maybe there's something about the way I was designed. Maybe there's something about the way I was put together, and I'm not going to say maybe, I'm saying 100% for sure, that I cannot find fulfillment without this in my life. And maybe the more of us that find that truth to be real, that's when things start to change at a higher level. And it's okay if we don't see that in our lifetime, but something's happening. There's a growing number of people that are discontent with just looking out for our own interests. And then that becomes the pattern of your life, just these small acts of love, hitting somebody sideways with kindness, and inspiring people in your community to do the same, and realizing and finding a joy and a fulfillment that only can be found when you intentionally put yourself in close proximity with the sorrow of somebody else. This work I'm doing is painful. It's sorrowful. I can't think of a sorrow that exceeds the sorrow of a 13-year-old girl that's been kidnapped from her family, that has to have sex with men that are 3 times her age and 3 times her weight. And when I'm sitting there and I'm hearing her story and pretending to be one of the guys that wants to have sex with her, it's sorrowful, it's traumatic. And yet there's a joy in putting yourself in close proximity with that sorrow. To be a person of sorrow, acquainted with grief, isn't that something that's so close to our design? And she's shy. She misses the simplicity of her life in the countryside. She clings to her friends' clothes as they walk through the room. Her high heels don't fit. And I love her. And I want something else for her. And most of the time it's not going to work, because somebody's going to take a $100 bribe and tip off the club before we show up with the police. Many times it will be one of the police that takes that bribe. But there has to be a tenacity to this. When we fail, when we miss the mark, the metric of success has to be in the fact that you're there. You're there. There's an emergency in your lifetime, and you're responding to the best of your ability. And at the same time, because you still have your youth, you still have your education in front of you, you're preparing yourself. You're building into, you're investing into your skill set, skills that you can then spend on behalf of the poor and the powerless and the oppressed and the hungry and those in need of clean water, those in need of legal representation, those in need of shelter and refuge. You're building a skill set, and you still have a chance to navigate your education that way. But just because you still have things to learn, just because I still have a ton to learn, doesn't disqualify me from getting there and getting into the front lines and putting myself in a community of people that know what they're doing with collective experience in different areas of expertise. I'm going to play a song, and then I'm going to talk a little bit more. I started writing this when my friend from India, Sudhir, and I were on top of a building in Asia. And some of the times we go into these places and they lock us inside. And it's frustrating to be in there, it's scary. And we were talking about that and what it does to him emotionally, and he said, but I don't want to worry about it too much, because some of these girls, they're locked in there all the time, and they don't let them out for an hour at night. They haven't seen the sunlight for days. And when he said, that's when I started writing this. Precious girl from the countryside,
only daughter of a farmer's bride, with so much to fear and so much to hide. She hides. She's resigned, it seems, and exhausted too. She's got memories of a dream that got lost en route, but her eyes still gleam from across the room. I write a love song for a prostitute. Sunlight, sunlight on her face, on her face, and her hair falls over her shoulder. She's so elegant as if she was older. I was there on the day that they sold her. Well, she went away where they told her. She prayed to you in the east side rain. She prayed, but she never knew your name. She prayed to you, but you never came. Oh, she prays still, but it still stays the same. Sunlight, sunlight on her face, on her face. She wants to feel sunlight. Sunlight on her face, on her face. Maybe I lost myself in this venture. I can drink more, but I can't quench thirst. I can knock on the door, but I can't answer. I'm not free anymore if she's in venture. And she prayed to you in the east side rain. She prayed, but she never knew your name. She prayed to you, but you never came. She prays still, but it still stays the same. Sunlight, sunlight on her face, on her face. She wants to feel sunlight, sunlight on her face, on her face. Alabaster perfume on her feet, from her hair. She's the last in the room and the first to care. She held you at the tomb with the dew in the air. Cruel spear in your side on the hill. She was there on the wall with the spires and the pale moon. Hid him there by her side in the back of the room. She's a child and a bride in Sahara Dune. She's a daughter of Syria and Cameroon. From the streets of Brazil to the hills of Thailand, on the boats from fields of Uganda sand. She's maybe 15, she's American. She's praying, are you listening? Do you understand? Sunlight, sunlight on her face, on her face. She wants to feel sunlight, sunlight on her face, on her face. She wants to feel sunlight on her face, on her face. She wants to feel sunlight, sunlight on her face, on her face. Sunlight, sunlight on her face, on her face. Thank you.
That is the currency that I have to invest. Six strings and a voice that's wearing out. It's not always this cracky. And I leave you with that, hope and that belief that what you have to invest is something unique. Your currency is unique, and nobody else has it. One last video, then we'll take a couple questions if that's okay. But if you text Remedy to 51555, you'll get updates on your phone, text messages whenever we make a rescue. Whether it's 50 girls in Latin America or 5 girls in Thailand or India. If it seems like what you're doing is insignificant, remember this. The Queen of the Elves was curious why Gandalf would pick a hobbit for such an important task. And Gandalf says, well, it's the small, everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keep the darkness at bay. And it's been the privilege of my life to get to look at ordinary people as they step into these extraordinary roles in the arena of freedom and justice and mercy and compassion. Unlike Liam Neeson's character in that movie Taken, I do not possess a particular set of skills. And yet I believe that justice is in the hands of the ordinary. We are ordinary, you and I. Students, professors, musicians, domestic engineers, architects, doctors. We're ordinary, and yet we're burdened with such glorious purpose. And there's an abolition movement going on in our lifetime, and someday when this thing called slavery is but a mere memory, they will look back at the day when the righteous rose up out of indifference. I only have this one life to live. It's over half over. What am I going to spend it on? The currency of my life. The currency of my moral capital. The currency of your youth. The currency of your time, your art, your creativity, the currency of your imagination, your sweat and blood. What if you can look back and say, I spent the currency of my life on freedom and justice and mercy and compassion? This is what I have. I have a rock and roll band. And you can say, what's it matter? Does 1,400 people really matter in the face of such evil, in the face of such darkness? And whatever it is you move towards, whatever you're drawn towards, you're against this corruption, you're against this darkness. But here's the thing about darkness. When you shine a light in the darkness, that candle of your good and righteous work, the darkness can't comprehend it. What is corrupt is going to turn to powder, it's going to decay, it's going to turn to rust. But your bravery, on the other hand, that's something that's going to last forever. There's an enduring quality to your selfless actions that will outlive the very universe, outlive the stars. I'm confident in that. The fear is real, but courage is moving forward in the face of fear. And your courage and your bravery in the face of fear will inspire others to be courageous. It's contagious, and there's magnetism to it. And those ripples turn to tidal waves as you join the rising tide of ordinary people who've decided not to look the other way in the face of these worldwide catastrophes. We are, you and I, we are propelled forward by this strange force. This longing to participate in the freedom of another human being, it's innate in all of us. It's part of our design. It's woven into the very fabric of our souls. It echoes in a deep chamber of my heart that maybe I didn't even know existed. Maybe you don't even know existed. Maybe it takes a melody to wake it up. Somebody's leadership, somebody's advocacy, somebody's voice is going to wake it up in you, and then you can pass that torch on, that torch that burned in a fire on a hill that an ancient prince that turned into a sheep herder, he saw that fire, and because of it he responded. He led 1 million slaves to their freedom, taking one step at a time across a sea that parted before him. And your role in all this is going to be different than my role. You might not end up fighting against slavery, but you can do a little bit to fight against slavery. You can text that. You can keep us in your prayers. You can tweet out something when we're successful. You can get something that one of those girls from Cambodia made to help fund the organizations that are rehabilitating them. You can do something small there. Just like with my family, we always want to go through everything at the end of the year. And if we haven't, I know you're not supposed to check boxes or whatever, but we haven't done one of those like, I was a stranger and you welcomed me, I was naked and you clothed me. If we don't have everything accounted for, we go find a way to do something. Maybe it's buying a goat for $200 for a family in Africa, and the kids love it. My kids love it, you know. So we can have these small contributions in all these different arenas of freedom and justice and compassion and mercy, and your role will be different than my role. Maybe you want to help girls be rehabilitated and restored. You want to help with art therapy or trauma therapy or use music to help. Maybe you want to do what my brother Paul does with foster care. Maybe you're going to work with Robert and go and volunteer here in your community, or go on a trip overseas to Thailand or Australia. Your role is going to be different, and there's going to be something you're drawn to, or there's going to be all sorts of things that you're drawn to, but that's okay. It's going to look different, because here's the thing about you and about me is I have a set of fingerprints that's unique to only me, and I want those fingerprints on these issues. And nobody else has your fingerprints. Nobody else has your voice. What if you can use your voice for somebody? What if you can lead in advocating for somebody else by using your voice? Just think of what it's going to do. Think of what it could do. And the fear is this, man. It might cost me my life, but it could be your life's work. And I only have one life to live. You only have one life to live. What do you spend it on? And when we're gone, in the ages to come, the sages will write, so raged the bearers of the light, so waged the few with all their might against the terrors of the night, with no sight in view from the depths to the heights. That's what I came to say. Anybody have any questions? I kind of threw that on you too fast there. I'm sorry. I need to work on my ending. If you have any ideas for how to end these things better, please let me know. Yeah. Nobody was calling it human trafficking when Emery Carmichael was fighting against it. But it would have to date back to my childhood when my mom would read me those stories. The 2004, 2005 Invisible Children videos that were played at some of the events that we played at that were fundraisers for Invisible Children was when I really started noticing it. And then in 2009, at a lot of the festivals our band played at, there was always people talking about trafficking, and different organizations like Love 146 was at a lot of them, and International Justice Mission and A21 were at some of those festivals. So for me, it was kind of this gradual thing. But I really honestly believed that I would end up, I watched Blood Diamond and I watched Lord of War with Nick Cage. He's incredible in that. And then all the Invisible Children documentaries, and then Machine Gun Preacher. So I really thought I was being compelled and drawn towards some sort of action in Africa against the enslavement of children and forcing them to carry AK-47s in conflict. I didn't make that clear earlier exactly what's going on. If you haven't heard, they force these kids to be on the front lines. And then I bought a whistle from an organization called Falling Whistles, because they put the boys that are too small to be able to hold the weight of a machine gun, they put them in front of the other boys naked, and they blow whistles. So it's like this haunting, awful thing to have an army of children coming at you. It really disheartens the enemy. It's just a total evil thing. So I thought it would be in that capacity at first. And that's why if you see some of my earlier songs from the Commodity album, there's a lot of references about weapons, and like, I don't need an AK or an A-bomb. I need you with me here now. I need you to stay long. I don't need a Band-Aid for my bullet hole. Don't need a brand name pharmaceutical. That line came from an article by Shannon Cedric Davis that had helped to expose Coney in a big way. She's a philanthropist from Texas that worked with Jimmy Carter and Desmond Tutu and a lot of other people on different peace initiatives. Any more questions? Yes? You know, I wondered that. I don't know the different. I guess I don't know the difference in definition of those two words. I use them interchangeably. When I think of cartels, generally I think of Latin America. And when I think of gangs and mafias, I think of Southeast Asia, but that's an incorrect distinction on my part. I know that the mafia that we're up against in Southeast Asia is oftentimes Russian funded, and there's a lot of Russians and Uzbekistani mafias that have a hold on even up into the ranks of government in some of the places we are. When I think of cartel, I generally think of people running cocaine and women and girls, but I don't know if that's a correct distinction. I know that we've been exposed to cartels, but something that you wouldn't realize is there's Israeli mafia that has strongholds in Latin America as well. For instance, there was a well-documented case a month or two ago where you heard about a cartel or a woman, a Mexican woman that killed 2 Israeli gangsters in a coffee house or something in Mexico City. So it's very complicated. These gangs, they're international gangs, they go and they find where they can get away with this level of exploitation and making this kind of money. And they, just like the motorcycle gangs from Australia, and the Australian government cracks down on them. I don't think you can wear a motorcycle gang jacket in Australia now. So a lot of them move up and buy brothels in Thailand. I'm going to research that. If you find out, let me know too. There was a hand.
Usually there's like aquariums like showing people and other things. And, there was like casinos and like big getting buyers versus showing people. Is this like out in the middle of a city? How does that work?
If you know where to go, if you're by yourself and you get off an airplane in Bangkok, Thailand, it is 100% sure if you're a guy, your taxi driver will show you pictures of naked women and naked girls and say, do you want to go here? Because they get commission off of that. So these places are easy to find because your taxi drivers are going to take you there. But in addition to that, some of the more open legal prostitution streets are guarded by tourist police. And the reason why I believe, as you research, I believe in the Nordic, I think they call it the Nordic model. In Sweden, they redefined prostitution as an act of exploitation against women and children, and they decriminalize it for women. It's a beautiful model, but I do not believe at the same time that prostitution should be legal anywhere, because it's very hard to identify instances of trafficking in context of legalized prostitution. So the countries that I go into, prostitution is legal, even though it's technically illegal for somebody to sell someone else. It's legal for girls to. So the way the bars get away with it in broad daylight, in the way that I'm talking about. Now that place that I showed you with it, that had the girls behind glass, and they called it a fishbowl. I said it's like an aquarium. That place was hard to find, and that took a whole night of crazy work on behalf of my partner that we went out with that night to end up there. But most of the places it's easy to find, they're protected, and the way they get away with it is the owner of the club, like that one club where I'm talking to that trafficker and the trafficker's telling that girl she has to start going with the guys, is they would put it on, if anybody's arrested, they say, she just works here dancing and she gets paid to dance and sell drinks. Whatever she does with customers is her own deal. So it's really hard for us. We got to prove that money's ending up in the hands of that bar to prove that they're making money off of selling sex with minors. Which that's, a lot of the ways we do that is confidential, but it becomes really interesting nights in order to make that sort of thing happen. What you would not realize is everybody in the world has smart cameras, smartphones. It's not abnormal. I don't know if we just pay a premium here in the States for them, but everybody has smartphones. And so the bondage is different than what you'd think. There's never, you never see somebody in handcuffs. That's not real. I don't think it helps to use that sort of imaging when we're talking about trafficking. There's threats against her relatives. There's a fraud, there's a force, there's a coercion, or she's a minor, and whether or not she knows it, it's illegal, and she shouldn't be allowed to do that. She's a minor, her brain's not developed. She can't make that decision on her own. That's what the international community just decided. And that's a hard, but most of the time, when they're there at the beginning, they're scared to death, and then they get used to it, they get numb to it. These girls are 90 pounds and they're drinking 10 shots of tequila a night. And you just got kind of used to that lifestyle. So it seems odd, that I don't usually pull my phone out, right? In that situation I did, there was these two sisters that were smoking hookah on the street at this little place, and I fell, it was the two girls and their brother was a ladyboy, which a ladyboy is it's a complicated thing in Thailand, but there's a market for guys. There's no way to say it. I'm not going to say it. You can look it up. Don't look it up, actually. But their brother is there to look after them, and I just fell in love with that family. Their parents, I think, had been killed, and they're just here at this bar. So I really became friends with them, and I wanted to figure out a way to get them out of that, but at the same time, that was the only way they knew how to make money. So it seems odd to have it's not my cell phone usually in those situations. I have an ops cell phone that can record the entire evening, both audio and video of everything I'm doing, and mark my geolocating and keep track of where we all are. So we have some cool technology like that. Yeah. You might have seen on there, she asked how often do I get to follow up with rescue girls. You might have seen the one time where me and Matt Parker are standing, and behind us there's a counter that has hundreds and hundreds of rocks on it, little stones. Well, the Exodus Road started when they started. The first time he rescued this first girl that they codenamed Sarah, he wrote her name on this rock. And he called it 12 million stones, because at that point in history, 8 years ago, they thought there was 12 million people enslaved. And so now we have 1,400 and some stones at the headquarters of the Exodus Road. But all the names are protected. They're representative names. We never use photos that can identify girls. And I never get to know, except every now and then Matt will do me a favor and say, hey, you remember that one girl from 6 months ago that we got her, just to let you know. So that's all I know. I just know we got her out. And the first time that happened for me was on my first time over in 2014. I sat with a girl named June, and she sat down with me. She had cut off shorts. It was a dirt floor in the jungle in the middle of nowhere. There was no lights anywhere, and we drove slowly through this town, and we saw girls. And I said, hey, slow down. And I was like, oh, never mind, they're too young. Because there's something in your mind that says, no, this is not really happening. But they're like, no, and so we pulled over, and June was being sold to me for $60, but then we made an excuse to leave, and we left. And then they raided that place, and the raid failed. And so I was devastated, and I got that message. But then 6 months later, we went back and raided the same place and rescued June and two of her friends. And they were cross-border trafficked from a neighboring country. And I don't get to hear all the stories I want to hear. But at the same time, that one story is enough for me, hearing June's story, and hearing her life was changed. I have a song called June on the Commodity album. And I wrote that song between the time that I heard that the raid failed and the time that she got rescued. So when the album came out 2 days after I found out she was rescued, which was nice for me. But I'd never needed to go to these places. The aftercare facilities, I don't really need them seeing another man. What I love about the aftercare facilities, they're run by women that are so amazing at their job. So the first time I ever went to any aftercare facilities was when I took my daughters and my son and my wife last year. So we get to see where our stuff's coming from and what we're part of, helping build that culinary arts school, helping build an elementary school. Because that particular community in Cambodia was known for men from all over the world would go there specifically for pedophilia. So there's really young kids being sold on that street. And when they started knocking out all these brothels, the whole economy of the village dropped out because no one's coming to the village to buy cigarettes and everything else that they bought while they were there. So this amazing organization called Agape International Mission has built back up the economy of that city, that village, in addition to helping the girls that have been rescued there, offering employment, which is preventative for other women in the area too, which is beautiful. I want to go meet them all and give them a hug. That would be my ideal scenario, but it just doesn't make any sense. They don't need to know who I am. Yeah. If you're paying attention at all to the Venezuelan refugee crisis, I meet so many girls on the street from Venezuela of neighboring countries that I'm in when I'm down there. And it's very easy to exploit desperate people. And that's what's happening. So we did a lot of work in one of the cities near there. And then I came back up here, and my friends down there, I wish you could meet some of these people. As serious as all this work is, there's a lot of good-naturedness to it. And don't tell anybody this, but I want to write a song with someone like, I don't know, Enrique Iglesias, or like the Latin language equivalent of Macklemore, but it's going to be cuidado, piso mojado, which means caution, the floor is wet. It's those yellow signs we have. And these dudes, they love laughing at this, because I'd say cuidado, piso mojado. And I wish you could meet these guys. They're amazing guys. But they texted me. They rescued 50 girls from one hotel recently. And the second one, also having to do with refugees, was there's Rohingyan refugees, Muslims from Rohingya, which is from Myanmar, Muslims from Myanmar, which is called Burma. This Muslim minority is being exterminated. And they're running for their lives. They're putting their families on these boats. They're hoping that they're legitimate human smugglers, which are there to help them, but also to exploit them by making them pay a bunch of money for their safety. But to them, it's worth it. The risk is worth it. But it turns out a lot of these boats, instead of being human smugglers, they're human traffickers. So they're selling these whole families, hundreds at a time, into detention camps in Thailand. And we used some cyber forensics gear after getting one trafficker's phone to find out the whole network through the contacts. There's some technology that pulled the contacts and the geolocators, and we were able to take down this whole slave ship operation, multiple boats, and free everybody from the detention camp. There was a mass grave there. And hundreds or dozens of Thai officials were arrested for their corruption involved in this, and the person that we partnered with, along with another NGO, the police, the government official from Thailand that we partnered with, fled to Australia because he was so worried about repercussions. So that was probably much bigger and had international repercussions. CNN called it a migrant crisis in the Bay of Thailand. It wasn't a migrant crisis. Those were slave ships, and these slaves were now free and had to be rescued. I think our time's up. I'm so thankful for you guys hanging out with me. I'm going to be here all week, so find me at some of these other events. I barely got this stuff set up back there, but if you want to look at those kimonos and bracelets and elephant pants. Thank you to everybody that brought me in and worked so hard to make this happen. I really appreciate being here.
UFTV is your university and community TV station.